Most people don't fail their New Year's goal because they lack discipline. They fail because they treat goals emotionally instead of objectively. They feel motivated when they start, guilty when they miss a day, and then they quietly stop and use the excuse that it's because life got in the way. I'm Salim, I'm a doctor living in London, and for years, my goals looked exactly like this too. They sounded good on paper, but failed the moment life got busy. But learning how to fix that is what allowed me to study well at med school to become a full-time doctor, and still make time for this YouTube channel and everything else that I care about. So in this video, I'll show you 4 reasons most people forget their goals within weeks and how to rebuild them in a way that actually survives real life. So the first thing that trips people up is how they actually review their goals once the initial motivation wears off. On paper, missing a few days doesn't seem like a big deal, but in reality, what tends to happen is that instead of calmly looking at what broke in the plan, people react emotionally to the missed action. There's a bit of guilt, a bit of frustration, and very quickly the goal becomes something they don't really want to look at too closely. And when that happens, nothing gets adjusted. The goal isn't analysed, it isn't simplified, and it isn't redesigned. It's just quietly pushed to the side. Not because the person decided to quit, but because the review process itself feels uncomfortable. I used to do this all the time. I'd set goals with good intentions, fall behind when life got busy, and instead of asking what part of the system failed, I'd interpret it as a personal failure and move on to something else. What changed things for me was realising that goals aren't something you're meant to feel good or bad about. They're systems. And if a system isn't working, the response shouldn't be emotional, because it should be analytical. You look at where friction showed up. Time, energy, expectations, something in the setup is always off. For example, say your goal is to work out 5 times a week and you keep missing sessions. Most people jump straight into the "I'm not disciplined enough." But when you actually look at the system, the issue is usually obvious. You're trying to train after long work days when your energy is already gone. The sessions are too long, or every workout feels too intense to start. That's a setup problem. The same thing happens with studying. Someone decides they're going to study 2 or 3 hours every evening, but they miss a few days and immediately assume they're lazy or bad at focus. But when you analyze it, they're trying to do deep, effortful work at the end of the day, with no clear starting point and sessions so long they feel overwhelming. Again, not a motivation issue, the system just doesn't match real life. This happened to me when I had full days of lectures and still expected myself to study another 4 hours in the evening. It wasn't that I lacked discipline, the plan just didn't fit my actual week, so I adjusted it. Once you start reviewing goals this way, missed days start becoming useful information. And that's important, because unless you're reviewing goals objectively, you don't actually have anything solid to improve on. And that becomes a real problem when most goals are vague, abstract, and disconnected from daily steps and plans in the first place. But now the problem is, even when you review your goals objectively, most of them are still too vague to actually fix. There's nothing concrete to adjust, nothing measurable to track, and no clear way to see what's breaking. A goal like get fit or study more sounds fine in theory, but it doesn't tell your brain what to do on Monday morning, Tuesday evening, or any day after. There's no clear action, no measurable signal that progress is happening, just a vague outcome that feels important until reality hits. And because there's no feedback, your brain has no way to know whether it's working or not. You might check off the goal in your mind, feel like you've done something, and yet nothing has actually changed. That's why people confuse thinking about goals with actually achieving them. They're getting emotional rewards without concrete results. For example, let's take studying. Study 3 hours a day is abstract until you break it down. What does study actually mean? Reading, flashcards, doing questions, and how do you know if the session actually worked? If you don't measure retention or completion, your brain has no signal. It can't tell the difference between a productive day and a day that just felt like you studied. Same with fitness. Get fit could mean running, lifting, stretching, but without tracking reps, distance, or time, you have no feedback. Your brain doesn't know if progress is happening, and motivation becomes the only driver. The fix here is simple but rarely done. Tie goals to specific actions and measurable feedback, not just get fit. Lift 3 times a week, track your weights, not just study more, 30 minutes of active recall per session, and check retention. Once you see progress, even small wins create a loop that keeps your brain engaged and prevents motivation from being the only driver. It's what I do for my goals. Even for piano, I make sure to not just say I'll practice this piece and learn it. I'll track how many measures I've learned and how long it took me, to see see if I'm focusing enough and making reasonable progress. This is why clarity alone isn't enough. Even when you know what you want, if you don't design execution and feedback, goals quietly fail. And this leads straight into the next problem. Most people don't plan for the day when things get hard, when energy is low, when work piles up, or when life just throws random problems. And those days happen far more often than we'd consciously be aware of. The mistake is subtle, but it can ruin your progress, because goals are usually designed assuming you'll have perfect focus, unlimited energy, and uninterrupted time. So when reality hits with a busy workday, unexpected stress, or fatigue, the system collapses, motivation dips, and the brain quickly decides it's not worth it. The core issue is that planning for your best days creates an illusion of control. You look at your schedule and think you can handle it, but the moment something doesn't go perfectly, the system fails. That's why many goals silently die without you even realizing why. So the shift you need to make is to design for resilience. Instead of building goals for peak performance, you design them to survive the low energy, low focus days. That means creating fallback actions that still count as progress, rather than just full wins. It's about making sure to keep the habit alive. For me, it could be that if I'm too tired for a full gym session, I'll go for a short walk or do a 5-minute workout. If I don't have the energy to write a full video script, I'll draft one point or outline a section. The point isn't to do everything perfectly every day. You just need to make sure that the system doesn't collapse and they are still moving forward, even if it's just a tiny step. You need to realize that the difference between people who stick to goals and those who don't is that the people that can stick to it can survive those average low energy days. And once you have a plan for this reality, then the work towards your goals becomes far easier. And just quickly before the next point, if you want one-to-one coaching with me to help with general or specific productivity issues, want advice on improving your study routine, or on how to get into med school, visit the link in the description. And now that brings us to the next problem. Once you've reviewed your goals objectively, designed them for reality, and built systems that survive low energy days, most people still treat them like moral commitments, as if they're promises they have to keep no matter what. The trouble with this mindset is subtle, but it's a massive problem. When a goal is a promise, every slip up immediately becomes a personal failure. Miss a workout, skip a study session, fall behind on a project, suddenly it's proof that you're lazy or not good enough. That emotional weight makes it almost impossible to correct. Instead of learning why the plan didn't work, people get frustrated or just stop trying altogether. And this is exactly why so many ambitious plans quietly disappear, because of the expectation that you must be perfect. That perfection mindset turns every day into a test of character rather than a test of the system. So the smarter approach is to treat goals like experiments. Every session, every action, every day is a chance to test your setup. If it works, you reinforce it. If it doesn't, you gather data, learn why, and adjust. Where if you miss a day, you see that as insight. Or if you find yourself falling behind, it isn't weakness, it's just feedback. It's a perspective shift, but it changes how you react and respond to how you progress on your plans or commitments. For example, this showed up back in med school during my study sessions. I used to expect myself to finish a full set of questions or 3-hour study block every day, and when I didn't, I'd feel like I'd failed entirely. But later, I treated it experimentally. If I only managed one set of questions or 30 minutes of active recall, it gave me data. I noted what got in the way, whether that was poor focus, time constraints, or low energy, and I adjusted my approach so that I still made progress. And it works in personal areas too, where if I don't practice the piano for 1 hour, I play some pieces I already know just to get some practice done rather than none. It's to keep the habit alive and make sure the system doesn't collapse, which is what can happen if you find yourself losing the consistency of doing something. Treating goals like experiments instead of promises closes the loop, because you get clarity, execution, feedback, and adaptability all working together. Without these things, you have an open loop where you don't actually know what's working, what isn't, or how to improve. So every setback feels like failure instead of useful information. But now a problem is that even when you've set goals, built systems, and created feedback loops, it's still easy to get stuck or fall behind. I've been there myself, where I'd have a clear system, but I'd still procrastinate or let progress stop, even though I knew exactly what to do. Over the past few years, I realized why this happens, and it's usually deeper than just distractions or a lack of motivation. It's something almost everyone struggles with when trying to stick to goals. And in this video here, I show exactly how I dealt with it and got consistent with my goals to get to where I am today, and it will help you do the same. So click the video to learn more.